everybody, and welcome to tonight's Facebook Live. My name is Amy, and snuggling with me here is one of my super dogs. This is Ooh La La. Tonight we have three great guests that we're going to be speaking to you with. They are each Superdog cast members, and they're also involved in the dog world, but all in very different ways. Welcome back. Before we get started, as always, if you have any questions for me or our guests, please put them in the comments below and I'm happy to answer them or to pass them along. Now, in terms of dog sports, dog diving is relatively new sport, but is a sport that took the dog world by storm. It is arguably one of the more popular dog sports out there, and it attracts people of all levels. With us tonight is our guest, Sheena, and she's been competing at the highest levels for many years, so much so that when we created our Watermark show, she was one of the first people that we reached out to. Please welcome Sheena, and who is your special guest with you?
This here is Riker. He's one of my dock diving champions. He's mostly retired now. He's almost 12, but he was actually in some of those pictures in the slideshow earlier.
He was fabulous in our show, of course. Let's start at the very beginning. What is dock diving?
Dock diving is a sport where there's a 40-foot dock and it's usually a 40-foot pool, although now the dogs are jumping so much farther. They're starting to get 50-foot pools, so the mostly whippets don't jump out. And they measure, there's different disciplines in the sport. There's distance jumping, where they measure from the end of the dock to where the base of the dog's tail hits the water, and that's called in Dock Dogs, which is one of the companies that does dock diving. They call that big air. Some of the other companies call it something different, but essentially it's just measuring the distance that the dog jumps. And then there's another one called speed retrieve, which they're timing the dog. So you hold the dog at a spot on the dock. For dock dogs, again, one of the companies, it's 20 feet of dock, and you release the dog. They run, they jump in the water, they swim to the end of the pool, and they grab a toy off of a holder, and they time you how long it takes you to do that. And then the third one is called extreme vertical, where they have a toy suspended in the air over the water, and the dogs jump up and grab it.
We saw the video of your dog doing that.
Yeah, that was.
Do people who compete in one typically compete in all three, or does a dog sort of have a specialty of the three that makes them their best sport, so to speak?
Most dogs definitely compete in the distance, and a lot of them also do speed retrieve, but not all of them do extreme vertical. It's a hard concept for some dogs to understand because the toy's not moving; it's just suspended sort of in space. And so it's a hard concept for dogs to learn. It's usually one of the last disciplines that they teach. They also have an Iron Dog score, which is essentially like a triathlon, I guess.
Combining the all three of them.
So in order to do that, obviously you have to do extreme vertical. So not all the dogs do it, but many of them do.
I've been doing a bit of training with my dog, my sports mix in extreme vertical, and it's interesting for people who don't realize a lot of the training's done on land. So which you think dogs love the water, you bring them to a pool and they're going to do it. Right. But so much of teaching them that concept of retrieving something that's not moving, it starts on the ground.
It's very hard for some dogs. And then there's some dogs that just see it and they're like, hey, I'm going to get that for you. And they have no trouble picking it up. Sorry, it's hard to say which dog will do that. Sometimes it's the dog you least expect.
I was going to ask you if you think certain breeds are better, like labs, like water dogs, ones that do it more instinctively. And like you said, people are now getting whippets that are so athletic, and they're not a dog that you initially would think is a dog that would be drawn to water.
Right. And a lot of dogs, one of my old dogs that's gone now was a German Shepherd, and he loved water. Like he knocked my husband over and dragged him into the lake once. And and whippets, I mean, any dog really, there's always going to be dogs that love it and hate it. And it's not always, breed specific. There's a dog in the club I'm in that is a bulldog. And she loves water.
I love that water, the dock diving and the water sports does draw people of all levels. And if you have a dog like a bulldog, it wouldn't be competing against your Mal. Like there's a division, or there's based on the size of the dog. How does that work?
Right. They base it on distance. So for big air, there's different divisions based on how far they go. So it doesn't matter if your dog's big or small. They're still measuring to the base of the tail. So it doesn't matter if you have a really long dog or a really short dog, they still measure it to the base of your tail, the tail. But yeah, there's lots of little dogs that jump really big too.
Yeah, it's nice that all the different breeds can compete or play. I guess that not everybody competes. Some people are just training their dogs for I think like a great form of exercise. Swimming is such a great way to play with your dogs or to exercise your dogs.
Yeah.
Are there any
like this?
Are there any risks involved with the sport?
I mean, as with anything that you do with your dog, there's always going to be a risk of something. Personally, I've never had an injury as a direct result. I've had dogs like rip a pad or something on the ground walking to and from, and that kind of thing can happen anywhere. I would say there could be a risk for some dogs of water toxicity if they're chasing the splashing too much. And they're ingesting a lot of water, and that can be very dangerous. But when you're at an event, you're not really necessarily spending all day in the pool. You jump once or twice, and then you're sort of out of the pool for most of the day. So it's not necessarily something to look out for when you're competing. When you're training, or even just walking the trails with your dog if they're drinking too much water.
it's obviously something to be concerned.
Right.
So of all the sports that are out there, what drew you to dock diving first, or what's your favorite part of that sport?
Well, it was actually one of my dogs that loved water, and my friend said, "Hey, have you heard about this?" And I'd never heard about it before, and she said she told me where they were going to be, and she said you should take your dogs and see how they do, and was sort of my introduction. When I started, I think it was 2006 was my first event. And at that time, it was maybe the first or second event they'd ever held in Canada. There was no practice pools. It would just show up and keep your fingers crossed. So it's really, really progressed so much since then. There's practice pools now, and people have pools in their backyard.
Yes,
just designed for their dogs.
It's like when you say about the pools going to 50 feet, like as a dog community, we become sort of enthralled with the sport and we become better at it. We become better trainers at it. Right. And breeders are breeding dogs that are better, not better dogs, but athletes that are performing better at these sports as well.
Right.
When you add dogs to your home, because I know that you also have rescue dogs, are you looking for a dog sometimes specifically for the sport, or has it just sort of worked out that way?
I've been really lucky with the dogs I've had. They've all sort of at least enjoyed water enough to build some more drive and build up their excitement for it. I have a dog now. He's just a year old, and he hasn't competed yet, just with COVID and everything happening. But I'm hoping that something will open up this summer and he'll get to try his hand at it. But he's actually been the most challenging dog to get in.
Oh, really?
Water. Yeah, and I think it's just it's going to take him a little longer, but I think he's going to do really well.
Yeah, he's very athletic.
He's very athletic, and he's learning how to play fly ball right now as well, and he's learning how to play agility. So
I think that COVID has taught us all that we have to take, at least here in Ontario, we've had to take a beat with our dog training, because I know I've had to take a step back, and things that I would have normally done by now, we're just slowly allowed to get back to things. So in a year,
I'm so excited. My last 5 dogs have all been rescue dogs, and I finally get a puppy. I get to mold this thing and sort of, let him grow up the way I want him to, experiences that I want him to, and it hasn't exactly worked out. So it's been challenging to sort of modify, my goals and some of my expectations. But it's also been nice because it has made me slow down, so I don't too into it and forget that he's still just a puppy.
And enjoy a different side of things.
Right.
My last question is, what advice would you have for somebody who is brand new to the sport and wants to sort of get involved in it? How would they do that, and what advice would you have them for their next steps in their journey?
If you have a dog that already swims and you know that they're swimming and they like to play ball or chase a ball or a toy, then it's kind of nice. It's one of those sports that you can just show up and have fun with your dog. You're welcome to sign up on site at an event and just give it a try. Otherwise, if you haven't ever had your dog swimming, I would suggest maybe going to a lake or somewhere where the dog can walk into the water and get comfortable at their own pace and swimming and retrieving a toy. Because the pool can be pretty daunting for dogs. They don't necessarily realize that this big blue open space that's very clear is actually water, and they're safe to jump into it. But
I think people make the mistake of I don't know how to say this nicely, but encouraging their dogs by pushing them into the pool, thinking that will teach. And so many dogs, you're just all their fear and their trust.
Yeah, so definitely. And now, like I said, there's facilities you can go. You can rent the pool. You can take classes. It's a really nice sport, and there's lots of junior handlers. There's lots of places.
And people are so willing to help you, because the more people that are in a sport, it grows, and so people want their sport to thrive. So it's a great way to get involved in the dog community, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you very much for all of your tips. It's such a hot day that I think talking about being a pool is a little tempting as well.
I wish I had a pool at home.
That was great. Thank you very much, Sheena.
Thank you.
Bye. Our next guest is Danielle. Danielle's been performing with the Super Dogs for over 7 years. She has 3 adorable Jack Russell Terriers that she shares her home with. One of the great things and unique skills about Danielle's dogs is not only that the skills they have at the Super Dogs stage, but is the skills that they have on the big screen. Danielle has been training her dogs and other dogs for movies, TV, and commercial work. Here comes Danielle up. Hey, Danielle.
Hi.
How are you? Can you introduce your special guest there? Love the bandana, by the way.
Thank you. That's my Super Dog Squad. He's my older guy. He's 11 years and a half old, and yeah, that's my first dog that started all. And
Started it all. Is he the first dog that you did movie work with, or TV or work?
Well, he's my first dog that I did commercials with it.
Yes.
Never did a movie, this one, but a lot of commercials.
So for a lot of people, they see dogs like in TVs and TV ads, commercials, movies, film, and they think, it looks like it's so, cool, and the bragging rights of having your dog. How does somebody even get involved in this? How did you get involved in it?
I always answer that it's a mix of hard work and luck, and sometimes.
Yes.
Because there's many great dogs that could do the work, but there's also a bit of luck and good timing, because you need to be there at the correct time. And now with the social media, there's a lot of gigs that are posted on Facebook or things like other social media, so you can be lucky to find out that this is the correct gig for you and apply, and you're getting taken. When I started, there was an agency in Quebec. Now there's not really any agencies, so you have to work your way around gigs. And when you hear,
of course,
about
having an adorable dog is helpful. You have dogs that have a really good look. They have, I think that look that people are looking for, and I think that certainly helps a lot. But even more so, your dogs are very well trained. Are there certain skills that you would train your dog for this sort of thing? Like, they're different than training your dogs for sports.
Well, you really have to have a dog that's very flexible, I would say. Like, you can change something on the spot, and they will still forget as fast as they learn. So you can redo what you were doing and change your training. So you need a dog that likes to learn and just do anything you will ask him. But for sure, you need duration and work around distraction, because it's always that. You're always far. It always needs to be longer and longer for stays or things like that. So you need the triple D: distraction, duration, and distance. So
I think what you said was very important about your dog. It's interesting because people don't think of that, but your dog has to be able to forget. Because if you think that your dog did a commercial, and for example, if he was trained to put his head on something, and the next commercial, he might be trained that he has to keep his head up. And so that's really interesting that they have to be able to train a new skill or understand that other skill is no longer what we're working on.
And sometimes it's even it's on the same commercial. They first wanted you to have the dog jump on the couch, and then no, he has to go straight to the couch but stay there. So you have to retrain the dog right on the spot to not jump on the couch anymore. And you train this for weeks before the gig. So yeah, you need to have very malleable dog that just as fast as they learn it, and not double guess what you're asking them. So.
Is that the major difference between training your dogs for this sort of work versus super dogs? I imagine in commercial work, there's also a ton of repetition. Compared to a super dogs, we do things, it's very different. Your dog does it once and they move on to the next thing in the show.
Yeah, but with the super dog show, it's always the same behavior that we expect from the dog. So you can train them really, really, really hard, and it can be very solid as a behavior, because they know it, they rehearsed it, and it never really changed. So, and that's exactly the opposite with the film and the commercial. It's always different. It's always and sometimes even when they send you the script and everything, and you get there and it's different from what they told you. So it can be outside, it can be inside, same as the super dog shows.
Yes. Yeah. And lots of distractions in both environments. We have a
Yeah.
question from Sam. Sam is asking, what cue do you use most?
I think it's a look, because I want to have you really need to take care of the eye line, the eye
Yes.
level of the dog. Doesn't look like he's looking at the trainer and at the treats or at the ball.
Yes.
So
Especially with a small dog, their eye line is completely different than a tall dog too.
yeah, and they have to not look so intent for the treats or rewards that you're holding or using. So I teach a look target so they can look exactly where they should. And sometimes I use a little toy or a little pom-pom, and I put
So they're
it
looking
right.
at something.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's something I repeat a lot. And of course, a stay, like good stay, good stay,
Yes.
good stay. When I can talk, and that's the thing. Sometimes you cannot talk, so you have to use silent cues, and now you use your hands and if you want to put another layer on top of this, sometimes you're not even in the same room, and they need to do the thing without you being there at all. So it's quite tricky sometimes.
Do you have a most memorable moment or biggest accomplishment?
Well, of course, being on an American movie with Dave Bautista was like very, very big for me. But it's all experience, the all learning experience too, because I literally moved to Toronto for 25 days. I stayed at the Wrangler's farm, and all I did was working, prepping the dog, rehearsing, and learning. So it was a very big experience for me. Of course, it's on top of my list.
Absolutely. And has there been some sort of work that you've done that's been the most challenging, where you showed up and the environment was completely different or not what you expected, or they changed the behavior you had to work on?
The worst is something that happened a lot more than I thought. It was what I was talking earlier about. It's handling from another room or behind a door. I never thought I would be doing this so much, but I did it. Like for my spy, I spent my whole days in the wardrobe, hoping for the best and releasing and hoping that she does the thing by herself, because I had to be hidden so much. So that's the worst. Like when you
hiding in it's not nearly as glamorous as everyone thinks it's going to be.
Totally not.
My last question is: do you have any? I know that you're often not allowed to say things. You can't give them away. But do you have any gigs that are coming up that you can tell us about?
Well, in a few days there will be the Republic of Sarah that's coming out. It's a series. I don't know if it's going to be in Canada, though. I hope. And Spade is featuring in this series. So if everything goes well and they goes for a season 2, we might have some more work around the corner for this. Finger crossed. But usually it's never like, it's when I expect it the least that I get the phone call, and
yes,
I get so I keep training and make sure I'm ready. My dogs are ready too.
Absolutely. Well, if not seeing you on screen, hopefully I will see you at a Superdog show soon once we're back at shows. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Our last guest is Dr. Tanya Dobransky. She is a chiropractor whose patients include both people and pets. Thank you very much for joining us, Tanya.
Hi.
Hello.
That's a call from Dizzy.
Hello, Dizzy. Can you introduce us? Tell us a little bit about Dizzy and who she is.
This is Dizzy Devil. She's an 8-year-old Australian Kelpie. She's very aware that we're on camera right now. Go lie down.
In the video at the beginning, was that her that you were doing the adjustments on?
That was her that was doing the demos for adjustments, yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey to become a chiropractor and then ultimately an animal chiropractor? Like, did you always know that's where you wanted to end up, or somebody who was in the dog world, did it just seem like it was an inevitable leap?
Yeah, so my journey to becoming a chiropractor started with me as a human athlete, as a teenager. I suffered a neck injury that just didn't want to get better. And my dad happened to be doing some electrical work for a chiro that was opening a new clinic in Calgary, and mentioned that I had this chronic neck injury. And so that was my foot in the door, for lack of a better explanation. And then it was actually a long journey. I didn't realize, but it took another 14 years between finishing high school and then doing an undergraduate degree in biology, and then the 4-year chiropractic degree to become a human chiropractor. And then similar entry into the animal world. I had one of my girls got an injury and started to see actually a canine body worker, which is kind of like a massage therapist for dogs. And, you know, somewhere along the way thought, like, this is ridiculous. I'm paying someone else to do something that I should know how to do. So started to do some research and discovered, again, you know, like, it's a pretty intensive program to become an animal chiropractor. So took that program, actually had to travel to Ontario, took another 6 months of very intensive training to then be certified in animal chiropractic. So we've been doing that now for the last almost 5 years.
Do you have a preference between the two?
I really like my human practice, but the thing I love about my animal practice is that they're just in the moment. You know, humans come with their story. I sprained my ankle 14 years ago, and that's why this is the problem. Dogs are like, hey, feels better, and off I go, right? They don't hang on to kind of that emotional side of an injury. So that part
is that the major difference between treating people or pets? I imagine, like, when you're treating a pet too, they don't speak, so it's harder for them to explain their injury to you.
Yeah, exactly. The evaluation process, I mean, we do rely a lot on the human, the owner, describing, you know, I noticed that the dog was limping on this limb, you know, communicating, do you mean you're right or the dog's right? That becomes an issue sometimes, right? And then you really have to rely on your skills as a chiropractor. So feeling how joints are moving, feeling what's happening with the tissues. Is there tightness in muscles? Is there heat coming off of an area? And then really observing the animal, right? Mm-hmm. So they will tell you where things hurt if you know how to look at the signs. Are they, you know, licking their lips? Are they yawning? Sometimes I'll get dogs that'll turn and they'll look at me. Sometimes they'll even position like, hey, this is the spot. I've gotten adjusted before. I know this is the spot, and they'll put it right into your hands, right? But you have to be open and know to look for that, right? That's part that doesn't come naturally. You definitely have to practice and learn over time.
Do you think like your journey to become a human chiropractor stemmed from you having an injury and being an athlete? Do you think your skills as a dog trainer and somebody who's in the dog world and somebody who's dogs at an elite level, do you think that helps you as an animal chiropractor, because you have a different sense of versus somebody that isn't a dog person that maybe just understands the skeletal structure of a dog, so to speak?
Absolutely. I have a lot of clients that have come to me because I also compete in dog sports. I got a very lovely compliment from one of my very competitive sprint mushing clients that said, if you're within a 14-hour drive of this clinic, this person who competes in dog mushing is the person you need to bring your dogs to. I mean, that speaks volumes when somebody says, you know, invest the effort to go see that person, right? And then absolutely being a trainer, and I mean, you've met her, I have a dog who's a little bit hard to read. So I've really had to hone those skills and find those little subtle cues, having lived with that dog now for 10 years. Yeah. So that's definitely helped me with some of those dogs that are tougher cases and very stoic when they get on the table.
We always say, like, the dogs are sent to us for certain reasons, and I think that's probably why Taz came to you to teach you all of those lessons too.
Absolutely.
I love that. What animals benefit from treatment?
I mean, the range is huge. Obviously, we all think, you know, athletes go and get care regular, like on the human side. High elite athletes will travel with whole teams of therapists, massage therapists, chiropractors, physios, acupuncturists, right? So obviously the very easy answer is to say the athletes or the working dogs. But, you know, I have a lot of older dog clients, right, that start to slow down with age or start to show soreness. It's harder for them to get up. So, I mean, you know, if your dog is limping, if your dog is slowing down, those are good times to seek care. And if you have a diagnosed injury, right, you've seen a veterinarian, they've diagnosed them with a musculoskeletal injury, you might want to consider adding animal chiropractic to your treatment plan, right? Along with what the veterinary is recommending in terms of rest and pain management and all of that stuff.
Is it something that people would do in addition or instead of an injury, but just sort of as an ongoing care for an older pet? Like as opposed to waiting for there to be a problem?
I have a lot of we call them maintenance
Maintenance.
clients, right? We don't have a known injury, but we know we're getting older, or we know we're that crazy dog that just doesn't ever slow down. And we want to prevent things from getting worse. So we get into a maintenance regime, right? With some of our veteran dogs, I have one right now who's a 15-year-old Staffy, and I can set my calendar to every 4 weeks she's coming in for an adjustment. You know, even if she doesn't look like there's anything bothering her, because we know if we go even to 5 weeks, that she starts to slow down. It's harder for her to, you know, keep going on her walks or getting out of her bed and those sorts of things. So,
and I imagine it's easier to keep a pet healthy than to treat an injury.
absolutely.
So staying on top of these sorts of things.
For sure.
If someone's going to the chiropractor for the first time, how do they prepare their pet, or what would you want their pet to come in knowing, or to how would we let our pets know this is going to be a different experience?
Yeah, the first biggest thing is that they be comfortable with being touched, right? Obviously, chiropractic is a manual modality. I'm putting my hands on your dog. I'm doing adjustments on joints. So, you know, they need to be comfortable being pet, being touched by a stranger, those sorts of things. I always recommend that people bring nice, tasty treats. I do things a little bit differently. Often when a veterinarian comes and approaches your dog, they're going to approach from the front, and they'll, you know, start with eyes, ears, nose, and work their way down the spine. I start on the opposite end. I actually start at the backside and I work my way forward. So I'm going to ask your dog to face away from me. So you having treats helps keep them facing the direction that I want them to face, right? The other thing is to be able to stand still for a while, right? A treatment can take 15 minutes to 20 minutes, depending on what we're working on. So we need to have sort of a little bit of patience, right? I'll work around anything. I've got crazy kelpies, so treatments you do where you're chasing the dog around the room, right? And it can also be beneficial to teach your dog to lay on their side. So if we want to work on some soft tissue, we want to do some massage into muscles. Sometimes it's easier if they're not weight bearing. So we ask them to side lie. Not every dog is comfortable with that. So that's, you know, kind of your advanced. If I have an athlete, I'm going to be doing regular care, teaching them to settle on their side so that we can do massage helps as well.
That all makes sense. Yeah. Have you treated any unusual animals?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that people really know about are horses and dogs. That's my dogs are really the bulk of my practice. I have a couple of cat clients, which is also very interesting. You may have seen a picture earlier there. That's Frank. And we actually treated him for self-barbering. So he licking and pulling his hair out. And so, well, why is he licking, right? And so we work to free up some of the joint motion in his spine, and we suspect that he had some weird sensation, and that's why he was licking a spot chronically. I've also actually ironically treated a cow before, which was interesting. You don't think of cattle as being you know, an animal that seeks out chiropractic care, but this was a cow that was trained, harness trained for 4-H, and was being shown and slipped, had gone to see the veterinarian. It slipped coming out of the squeeze, and then stopped walking. And so we did some soft tissue work and some adjustments, and then up he went and off he went and never looked back. So
that's awesome. I'm happy that somebody, because you don't think that people might do the extras for all farm animals. So that's a very nice story. When you become a chiropractor, all animals are different, so you have to learn the structure of every animal. That's challenging.
You need to know, like, some animals will be predisposed to certain types of injuries or certain types of cases. So, like in the agility world, we're seeing a lot of medial shoulder instability. Well, why is that? Medial shoulder sort of laxity or an injury to the rotator cuff. Well, what are the most common breeds we see in agility are herding dogs, and herding dogs have that low squat, arms out to the side so that they can stalk after the animals. So it sort of predisposes them to that medial shoulder injury, right? The variety in segments, right? Humans have 12 thoracic vertebrae, dogs have 13, horses have 18, right? We need to know that so you know where you are, what you're working on, right?
Do you have a specific, besides the cow, a success story that you could share with us?
You know, treating all animals is very rewarding. One of my favorite parts is when you're done the adjustment and they turn and they're so appreciative. I mean, that gets me every single time. It never gets old, especially those dogs that are a little, you know, a little tougher, a little shyer when they turn and they're just like, oh, thank you so much for the adjustment. I recently had one that was actually referred to me by a veterinarian that I hadn't met before. So that was very interesting. And it was referred, it had just come up where it wasn't using its back end. And they weren't really sure why. It's an older dog, and the owners didn't really want to put a lot of money into doing advanced imaging, right? So you do an x-ray, it costs us a little bit of money, but to go further into MRI, CT, that gets quite expensive. And so this veterinarian, I guess, was aware of chiropractic, looked me up and referred this client to me. And when she came in, the owners were actually having to carry her in because her back end was just not working. And so, you know, those are always daunting cases. You know, I try, we do a big evaluation. We identify, you know, where the point of injury is. The good thing is that this dog still had control of its bowel and bladders. That's always a good sign. It still had reflexes, so that's a good sign. And we ended up finding a couple of spots in her low back. And because she was so painful, that's all we did, just 2 spots. And then next day she comes waddling in, not perfect, but walking, holding up her own weight. You know, you can still see she's dragging, but she's up and moving. Oh my goodness. Like, I was in tears that day.
It must be rewarding for both you, but also the pet. It's a lot of responsibility. So to give a dog, improve its quality of life is quite remarkable.
Yeah.
We have a question for somebody from Sherry who's asking, how often do you recommend preventive treatment for a large breed or senior dog?
Yeah, so it really varies by the dog. It depends on how fit, how active. Some of my more athletic older dogs, I mean, I've got Newfies. We see once a month. We kind of, you know, schedule every 4 weeks or so, 5 weeks, or in that range. And sometimes if they're a little bit weaker, or they're starting to get, old dogs get a condition called sarcopenia, which is wasting of the muscle as they get older, then we may have to do adjustments more regularly. So we'll go into the 2 weeks range, sometimes even weekly. It's all about quality of time left, right? We want to make them as comfortable as possible for as long as possible, right? So
you're in Alberta and I'm in Ontario, so it might be a little bit different. But if somebody is interested in seeing a chiropractor, sort of where do they start? Do they go to their vet? How do they find someone like you?
So in Alberta, the legislation is that anything that's done on an animal falls under the umbrella of veterinary medicine. So in order to see someone like myself, who's a human chiropractor, who's then certified in animal chiropractic, we do try to get a veterinary referral in place. I have a form that I send out to the primary veterinarian. They sign it. And there is a caveat in the legislation that says that somebody who's trained, licensed, I carry malpractice insurance, that the veterinary can refer. And that's the area where it gets a little bit tricky. So in order to take the program that I took, you have to be either a licensed practicing chiropractor or a licensed practicing veterinarian. Now, there are some other programs, unfortunately, that teach just, you know, if Amy White decided she wanted to go and learn how to do adjustments, she could take a weekend course. So that's what you want to really weed through, right? So a good place to start is, say, like the College of Animal Chiropractors, the American Veterinary Chiropractic Association. Those websites that are accredited organizations have a list of people in your area. Word of mouth, obviously, I get probably 90% of my patients as, you know, my friend does agility and they recommended me to you. So, but, you know, call the person that you're interested in seeing and ask those questions. Ask, do you carry malpractice insurance specific to your animal practice? Right? I carry for my human practice, but also for my animal practice. I have to upkeep my license. So I have to take courses in continuing education to maintain that accreditation, right? So these are the standards that sort of keep our quality of care higher, and make sure that your animal's in good hands.
Do you require an x-ray then for all of the animals that you see, or would it depend on the injury that's being presented?
It depends on the injury that's being presented. So maintenance cases, usually a veterinarian is comfortable to sign a referral just based on the knowledge that they have, and they know that this person is doing sports and they want to do a maintenance case. If the dog has lameness, meaning they're limping, visibly injured, or you saw an accident, right? I saw them fall off of something, I saw them crash into something. That's where you want to get a vet exam first. And then typically veterinarians will take an x-ray just to make sure nothing's broken. Sometimes dogs will limp because of other medical conditions, the big scary one being cancers in bones, those sorts of things, right? So we want to make sure that we're not missing one of those bigger, scarier things that's not a chiropractic case before we then go start and adjust. But that's why we want to have that veterinary care team involved prior to starting care.
I encourage people to explore it. I had a dog that injured his pelvis. He was in an accident. And so I did everything that you can do, because that's what we're going to do. And he ended up needing adjustments on his shoulder. So nothing to do with the pelvis that he broke, but because of the injury that he had. And we had focused so much on his rehabilitating and doing, and all of, the lasers and the massage and everything that we were doing for his pelvis. And then when we started to rehab him and spending time in the treadmill and things, we were like, he actually has short shoulders. Yeah. And so I think having a team and having a chiropractor part of your team and looking at your dog's whole body, that you can, I think some things can get missed if you don't have a team like that.
And I always tell people, I have my level of training. So the glasses I put on look at things from a chiropractic standpoint. Your veterinarian has their training. They're looking from a veterinary standpoint. Your, rehab specialist or your physio is looking from a physio standpoint. We're probably all looking at the same thing, but that change in perspective makes sure that, nothing gets missed, like you say.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Tanya. I apologize we went over time, but I think you and I could talk dogs forever. So thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully I'll see you at a show soon. I miss you guys.
Fingers crossed. Take care.
Take care. That's all the time we have tonight. Of course, we always encourage you to love your dogs, play with your dogs, and communicate with your dogs. And lastly, I encourage you to keep an eye on our calendar. We're starting to book shows, and we'll be updating our calendar soon. Take care, everybody.